Overdrive, today we tell you all about the long-range electric vehicle from BYD, the Atto 3. Find out what makes the 5th generation Grand Cherokee so appealing, and we revisit the season finale of the Indian Racing League from the Hyderabad street circuit. Hello and welcome to Overdrive. I am Soini Dutt. Now, BYD might seem like a new name for the Indian audience, but the brand has been operating in India since 2007. Now, the Atto 3 is the first serious offering in the passenger space, and this SUV is pretty impressive as well.
The Auto Expo is coming back in January 2023. That's a break of 3 years, and that's because waves of the pandemic have been delaying things, creating all sorts of problems. Now, my last memory of any motor show has been the Auto Expo, the 2020 Auto Expo. And I remember the buzzword at that Auto Expo was China, for some good reasons as well. Because you see a lot of Chinese car makers came in with their wares, showed their upcoming vehicles, talked about their India plans. Some of it materialized, some of it didn't. But somewhere in one corner, one little corner, was a very little exhibit for BYD, or Build Your Dreams. You see, unlike a regular LFP battery pack, where you have the cells that are put into a rectangular structure or a rectangular module, much like a brick, and then all these modules or bricks are sort of assembled together to make the battery pack. The blade pack essentially uses cells that are stacked into, say, slim steel boxes that are about that tall and almost as wide as the width of the car. And then all these plates are sort of stacked together into the floor to make that blade battery pack.
So this essentially eliminates the need of modules, which in turn means lesser material used, some weight saved, and it's also safer.
Now, if you were to research about these batteries, you would often hear the term nail test. What that essentially means is, if a long nail were to be punctured through an LFP battery module, it would release a lot of hot gases and eventually turn into a fire. The battery fires that we all have been hearing about, talking about, etc. Now, what happens with the blade arrangement is that these cells, if you were to pierce a nail through that, because these cells run cooler, because this arrangement is like, say, a heat sink, the heat dissipation is much quicker, much faster, much better. Also, these cells have a higher starting temperature for an exothermic reaction. Also, they don't release oxygen, so a thermal runaway is literally not possible. So what that means is, the bottom line is that the chances of a battery fire happening with this kind of a setup are next to nil. And that is exactly why this battery pack is such a big deal.
It also saves weight, and since the design creates a sort of a ladder structure, it gives the chassis better rigidity too.
So what that means is that BYD is able to save weight elsewhere in the chassis without really affecting the rigidity of it. What that translates into is that the vehicle feels quite sure-footed when you are making lane changes or taking corners, while at the same time, around tighter switchbacks, it still has a level of agility, it still has a level of ease when maneuvering through tight spaces, etc., and that's a good feeling.
The high-speed stability is quite good, and at city speeds, the Atto 3 feels as good as the other premium IC cars in this price bracket, and that's saying something. The single motor configuration provides brisk performance, and you don't really miss an all-wheel drive or a twin motor setup on this urban crossover.
Now, for those of you who are in the mood for sporty driving, there are the sporty modes as well. I use the word modes because, well, you have multiple. So, for example, the mode switch here on the center console will only make changes to the way the powertrain behaves. So you have Eco, which is sort of a dull response as you would expect. Then you have the Normal, which is ideally suited for city and highway runs. And then you have the Sport mode, which makes it a lot more eager. But this will only make changes to the powertrain response. Now, usually with electric cars, you get paddle shifters behind the wheel, which let you alter different levels of regen. And usually there are at least 3 levels of regen that you can play with or choose from. Here, however, you have one switch on the tunnel console, and that will only let you cycle between 2 modes, standard and high. Now, standard is as natural as it can get, but it still doesn't give you a strong enough regen, especially for the kind of speeds that an electric car can deceptively get onto. So you are still resorting a lot more to the brake pedal every now and then. And on the high, well, it's a bit too jerky. Whether you're driving in the city or on the highway, that high regenerative braking is a bit too jerky. It's a bit too strong for my liking.
The ride quality is supple as long as the road is smooth, which was the case on Chennai's ECR. It tackles ruts and joints pretty well too, but thuds through potholes, though not as harshly as the MG ZS EV, the other EV of Chinese origin that the Atto 3 surpasses on specs, space and size. In fact, the overall comfort of this BYD is quite good, and the seats also play a big role to that effect.
So this is a card that unlocks the car. It's NFC enabled. So all you need to do is tap it on the outside rear view mirror and it unlocks. Now the good part, if I have it in my wallet and if it's a RFID enabled wallet or RFID protected wallet, it will not lock. You will need to take it out, tap it here again and it locks. Now, if you look at the design, of course, that's the first thing you're going to notice when you get inside this cabin. It just doesn't mimic whatever you see on the outside. It's not conventional. It doesn't have the conventional lines. It isn't boring either. It has a nice, happy, young vibe to it. There's a bit of music inspiration as well. If you especially look at the doors, you have the round speaker and then three strings flowing from it. And also these AC vents that you see right here, well, they are inspired by dumbbells is what BYD says. Now, as far as the screen goes, if you leave it in its vertical orientation, it doesn't really obstruct vision. In fact, the upper edge of the screen is exactly in line with the rim of the lower rim of the windscreen. So it doesn't obstruct your vision in any way. But what does obstruct your vision a little bit are the big headrests that you see at the back, especially when looking through the rear view mirror. The aperture for the rear view is a bit small, but that's me nitpicking. Anyway, coming back to the screen, there are a few other functions that I need to show you. Continuing with the cameras, so when you go into vehicle image, you have a 3D view and it's pretty detailed. In fact, if I were to turn blinkers on right now, even that shows, so it's quite detailed and it's pretty quick. What I also like is the underbody camera. So here with this view, you can get an underbody camera. You can see the car going transparent. So when you're on the move, it's essentially using the feed from the front and the rear cameras to show you what's underneath the car. So maybe if you are driving off the road, or if you're trying to avoid some sort of a hurdle, or trying to avoid maybe a stone or something that's lying on the ground, this is a very good view. So I think it's a very good tool. You do get a lot of light filling into the cabin thanks to the large glass house, the big panoramic roof, which extends all the way to the back. So in terms of the roomy feeling, not a problem at all. I quite like the seats as well. The bolstering of the front seats is quite good. The seating comfort is quite good. And because they sit a little tall, the foot space at the back is actually quite nice. You also get ISOFIX child seat mounts. Interestingly, you get an ISOFIX child seat mount even for the front passenger seat. So if you want to carry your child in the front, that is possible too.
The cabin is secured by 7 airbags. And the list of safety features is quite exhaustive too. The Atto 3 also has a 5-star Euro NCAP rating for a car that is spec similar to ours, which means we get the ADAS safety functions too. While I was busy evaluating all the features and the driving dynamics, my colleague Tuhin went off to Pondicherry, had a pani chocola, and put 320 kilometers on the Atto 3 with around 25% state of charge still left in the 60 kWh battery pack. His driving included a mix of highways and Chennai city traffic as well, and an isolated calculation of both these stints hints that a 450 km real-world range is easily achievable. That's an exceptionally good number for a car that looks like a hatchback but is almost the same size of the Hyundai Creta. In fact, it is the largest EV under 40 lakh rupees at the moment.
Well, the BYD brand seems to be on the radar for many of the Indians over the past few years, but with the Atto 3, the rate of interest has just simply grown over time. We'll just have to wait for the sales numbers to see just how well the brand is doing in India. On that note, let's take a very quick break on the show, but coming up on the other side, we'll tell you all about Welcome back, you're watching Overdrive. Now, Jeep India has launched the 5th generation Grand Cherokee in India starting at 77.5 lakh rupees. It comes with a whole suite of ADAS functions. Bookings and deliveries have already begun. But would you want to pick this SUV over, say, a BMW or a Mercedes, especially if you're looking for a luxury SUV with all the frills? It's time to find out.
Set your sights on the Jeep Grand Cherokee, and the sheer mass of SUV in front of you is endearing in itself, although it's about as large as its competitors. So much of this sense comes from the blocky but still contemporary styling. Striking touches are the deep 7-slat grille over which the bulged bonnet folds in and the wide, slim LED headlamps. Contrasting with this is the big bumper that juts out with its simple but large openings. This fairly functional aesthetic continues to the sides. The large 20-inch wheels with their simple but clean design add to this in their typical Jeep square wheel arches. The rear is much like the front, attractive but not overly flashy with its condensed tail lamps and the contoured boot lid. Now once you've stepped inside the Grand Cherokee, you realize that it is quite a plush and stylish place to spend time in, and that starts with just how the cabin has been designed. And that quite plush feeling continues with the materials and textures that Jeep has used inside the Grand Cherokee. So for example, this panel here is completely soft touch with this nice stitching. The wood veneer feels really quite nice, actually like wood veneer. And even here, the door panels, this plastic is soft, same with the wood. And all the panels here, they're soft to touch, which means that you really find a sense of plushness inside the cabin. You get 5 screens in this cabin. To start with, you have this 10.25-inch instrument cluster, which is really quite useful. It's functional, gives you a lot of information clearly. Then you have this 10.1-inch touch screen, which is again quite easy to use. There are hard button redundancies for everything, so it's very easy to use, very functional. You have this screen for the passenger where they can play music. There's an HDMI port for them to play videos, and they can even send navigation data from there to the main screen, so it's very useful. You have a head-up display which gives you just enough information that you need, like the speed and the ADAS functions. And then you have this, a very useful feature for our conditions, a mirror for the rear camera. Now if you are looking at the Jeep Grand Cherokee, then invariably the second row will be quite important to you. And in that case, it's largely good news as well. So for example, the seat back, it's nice, well cushioned with the nice firm cushioning, so that's not a problem. And then you can also recline it to quite a comfortable angle, so again you can get into a nice seating position easily. Although the seat squab, the lower squab maybe could have been longer, there's not much underthigh support, and that's also due to the floor being slightly high, which also makes getting in and out slightly difficult, not very difficult but slightly. The boot is quite functional too, and the space is wide and deep, even with a space-saver spare wheel tucked underneath. The Jeep Grand Cherokee gets level 2 ADAS. The adaptive cruise control is quite easy to engage and controls speeds well enough, but we found the lane keeping function to be quite erratic. For passive safety, you get a crisp set of 360-degree cameras with washers, 8 airbags, brake assist, TPMS and rear seatbelt warnings. India is the first to get the right-hand drive Jeep Grand Cherokee. Unlike the big V6 and V8 mills in the US spec cars, this version gets the same 2-liter turbo petrol as the Wrangler, putting out 272 PS and 400 Nm. Now the outputs may seem healthy, but this small displacement motor needs some pushing and prodding before it's fully up and running. So at say below 2000 RPM, the Jeep Grand Cherokee can sometimes feel a bit hesitant and jerky, which also means that at slow moving traffic or on inclines, you might find that progress isn't quite as seamless as it should be. Another great trait is the refinement inside. The active noise cancelling does seem to work. The Grand Cherokee keeps wind and road noise out as well as anything at this price. But probably the most reassuring trait of the Jeep Grand Cherokee is its ride quality. Now, as with any Jeep, there's always a sense of toughness coming through when you're in this SUV. So of course at low speeds, maybe some of the sharper bumps, it feels a bit firm, but again it's very well damped. And then when you pick up speed, there's a sense of pliancy, there's a sense of stability that really is quite endearing. It really ties in with that sense of solidity that you think of when you think of a Jeep SUV. Now we couldn't do any serious off-roading with the Grand Cherokee, But we don't think too many owners in India will be quite too keen on this either. But you get the base Quadra-Track 1 4x4 system. We think Jeep could have packed in the more advanced Quadra-Track 2 system with its low range mode, if not for anything but dinner table bragging rights. Otherwise you get the off-road modes, hill descent and off-road view cameras. Priced at Rs 77.50 lakh, the Jeep Grand Cherokee undercuts its rivals but only by a slim margin. This SUV will always have to contend with not having a 3-pointed star or a blue and white propeller on it, but make no mistake, the Jeep Grand Cherokee is an option you cannot ignore in this segment.
Well, the Jeep Grand Cherokee has impressed us with its mighty feature list and its extreme off-road capability, but is it an SUV that you would want to put your money on? While you think about that, we'll take a very quick break here on the show, but coming up on the other side, we take you through the highlights. League was conceptualized with a very revolutionary vision in mind to bring international and domestic racers to race against each other on home soil. Now, the first season of the Indian Racing League has taken place over the course of 2 weeks at the Madras racetrack, but now it's the very first time that the IRL racers are going to be racing at the Hyderabad street circuit. Let's take a look. After the inaugural IRL race weekend at the Hyderabad street circuit was cancelled due to security reasons, all focus was shifted to the grand finale of this league at India's first street circuit. At 2.83 km in length, this circuit features 17 turns with an interesting mix of slow, medium and high-speed corners designed to encourage more overtakes during the races.
It's a beautiful circuit. It was incredible when it was dry, and even when it's wet, it's still really nice to drive. So really looking forward to it because unfortunately we couldn't get racing in the first round. So we're very excited to race here this weekend.
But what added to the excitement was that it turned out to be the very first time many of the young racers would be driving at a street circuit.
Well, it's my first street track actually I've driven on. I like the layout, I like how technical it is driving-wise, and it provides a great challenge for us.
So this is my first time out on a street track and made a tiny mistake. It's wet, it's a street circuit, you know, anything's going to cost you so much.
Overtaking in a street circuit is always a risk because, yeah, if you overshoot, there's not much space for errors, so the walls are pretty close, but I enjoy that. I love taking the risk and I hope for another good race day. 6 teams representing 6 cities from India with 2 cars and 4 drivers per team make up the series with a total of 24 drivers on the grid. Every team also had 1 female competitor, making the series a gender-neutral one. You know, I've grown up racing with men. It's literally my whole world. I was the dark horse in this motorsport. You know, being a woman in a male competitive sport is very difficult at times. But you know, I feel like IRL made sure that we were like a big family. But you know, at the same time, I get to drive with all these amazing drivers like Neil Johnny, Oliver Webb, John Lancaster. You know, we've won 24-hour Le Mans and every series you can think of. And you know, me as a 17-year-old rookie, I learned so much from them.
I think it's a cool new thing to do, you know, a bit of a mix between sprint and endurance racing, and in these pretty cool kind of half prototype, half single-seaters. It's great. And even more, I love working with my teammate, Nico Bora, because we've known each other for years, so we're super close.
Coming into the race weekend, Team Blackbirds Hyderabad were the clear favourites, leading from Godspeed Kochi by a very small margin of points. But with the unpredictable weather came some serious, exciting races, one after the other. After a few rolling starts of the feature race, the Godspeed Kochi cars maintained blistering pace in 2nd and 3rd position to clinch IRL's very first team championship, while Akhil Rabindra from the Hyderabad Blackbirds team topped the drivers' standings. Chennai Turbo Riders also had a lot to celebrate as multiple Indian national racing champion Sandeep Kumar, along with his teammate John Lancaster, beat the charging Godspeed Kochi duo in the feature race to become the first winners of IRL's inaugural street circuit race.
If a city had to do it, it's Hyderabad. Coolest city, look at the lake, the whole ambience, and the drivers love it. And this is something which is about an adrenaline rush, and there's nothing that will get your blood pumping like a superb race like this. I hope India has many more.
Arman, thanks for joining us. I remember speaking to you guys 4 years ago when this was still a dream to get a street circuit right here in India, and it's finally happened. So what's your take on it?
It's been a long 4 years. I think we've come a long way, obviously, and I mean, who thought, right? Who thought it was possible? And obviously, thanks to the right partners and people who shared the dream and getting the right personnel on board, we've actually managed to accomplish this.
We were expecting the street circuit to be fireworks, but what's added to it has been the rain. The circumstances have changed completely.
Yeah, they've really been thrown a curveball here, but it's a great experience, and I think the young guys are doing really well, the young girls and the guys, you know. So we have some kids who are 16 years old who are still shining and up the timesheets. So I think what this platform has actually done is, you know, help even the inexperienced guys and girls, you know, show their skills on an equal platform, and that's what this whole thing is all about.
Well, trust me, watching all that racing in the heart of Hyderabad city was a lot of fun. In fact, Hyderabad is also going to be hosting the inaugural Formula E race in February next year. With that, it's time for us to wrap up this week's edition of Overdrive. But remember, you can stay in touch with the team through Facebook, Twitter, as well as YouTube. And you can follow our latest updates on Instagram. We'll see you next week. Until then, goodbye. Many thanks for watching.